In 1707, a phantom island appeared on every major world map and nearly redirected an empire's entire naval strategy around it. For over a century, cartographers across Europe, Britain, and Spain all agreed on one thing. Somewhere in the South Pacific, roughly 5,000 kilometers south of Tahiti, sat a substantial landmass. They called it Aurora or Friesland, depending on who was drawing. Ships were outfitted, trade routes were plotted, naval expeditions were funded, all for an island that didn't exist. Now, you might assume this was simple incompetence, mapmakers copying errors from older maps, nobody bothering to verify. That's the story most textbooks lean on. Cartographers were careless. Geography was fuzzy. Case closed. But walk through the actual evidence with me, and you'll see something far more deliberate, far more human, was happening beneath the surface. The island first appeared in print around 1589 in a Spanish chart. A Portuguese navigator named Alvaro de Mendanha claimed to have spotted it during a voyage. No detailed coordinates, no sketches of harbors or mountains, just a notation, Isla Aurora, somewhere thereabouts. That vagueness should have been the red flag. Instead, it became the template. By the 1640, the Dutch were obsessed. They controlled Pacific shipping routes and wanted to know what lay in those empty waters, partly for trade, partly for territorial claim. If Aurora was real and uncolonized, the Dutch could establish a way station, a resupply point, a foothold in a region Spain was already dominating. Suddenly, the phantom island had geopolitical weight. Here's where reputation and institutional pride took over. Once a respected cartographer, say, a Hondius or a Bliu, placed Aurora on their map, other mapmakers faced a choice. Challenge the authority of an established name and risk looking ignorant, or copy the island and stay safe within the consensus. Most chose safety. By the early 1700s, Aurora was on nearly every major map in Europe. British charts showed it. French charts showed it. Spanish charts showed it. The more maps that included it, the more real it became in the collective imagination. No one had actually sailed there and confirmed it, but the weight of repetition created truth. Then, in 1762, a British naval captain named Alexander Dalrymple got his hands on some old Portuguese logs. He found a reference, just a reference, to an island sighting that matched the Aurora coordinates. He became convinced the island was real. More than convinced. He became its evangelist. This single man, this curator of old documents, nearly convinced the British Admiralty to fund a major expedition. Think about what that would have meant. A full British naval expedition, resources diverted, ships sent south into uncharted waters to find an island that wasn't there. Trade routes would have been redrawn, colonial ambitions reshaped, all because of a name on a map and a man's certainty. But here's where the story actually turns. Other captains, skeptics, started sailing the coordinates. In 1762, again, the British sent the HMS Dolphin through the exact waters where Aurora should have been. Nothing. They sailed again in 1767 with the HMS Swallow. Still nothing. No reef, no land, no sign of anything. The evidence was mounting. But and this is the crucial part, cartographers didn't immediately erase Aurora from their maps. Why? Because admitting the island never existed meant admitting decades of maps were unreliable. It meant questioning the authority of dead cartographers. It meant institutional embarrassment. So Aurora lingered. It appeared on maps well into the 1800s, even as evidence of its non-existence accumulated. Some cartographers marked it with a question mark. Others noted it as doubtful. But they kept drawing it because the cost of removing it felt too high. Reputation is a stubborn thing. What finally killed Aurora wasn't a single discovery. It was the cumulative weight of failed expeditions, improved navigation instruments, and eventually, photographs from space that left no room for doubt. By the 1960s, the Phantom Island had vanished from official charts, but it took 370 years. The real story here isn't about a mapmaker's mistake. It's about how institutions protect themselves, how consensus, once established, becomes self-perpetuating, how a single vague reference, a Portuguese navigator's notation, became fact because it fit what people wanted to believe, that the world still held undiscovered territory. Aurora nearly rewired global trade routes because powerful people, like Dalrymple, believed in it enough to act. If the Admiralty had funded that expedition, if ships had been diverted south, If resources had been committed to finding a phantom, the entire calculus of 18th century Pacific exploration shifts. History pivots on smaller hinges than this. This is the exhibit I always linger on, not because of the map itself, but because it teaches us something uncomfortable. We assume our information systems are built on facts. They're not. They're built on trust, on authority, on the fear of being wrong. One person's uncertainty, repeated enough times across enough maps, becomes the next person's certainty. The phantom island of Aurora reminds us that even the most authoritative knowledge systems, maps, charts, encyclopedias, are human constructs. They can be wrong. They often are. And the scariest part, we might not know it for centuries. Subscribe for more forgotten moments that nearly changed the world. Stories, the history books left out.